They came like an unstoppable wave, rolling across ancient lands with a kind of brutality that left entire nations trembling. The Assyrian Empire, at the peak of its power, dominated every kingdom in its path. Their chariots gleamed under scorching sun and silvery moon alike. The clatter of their marching feet echoed through valleys that had once known peace. From the vantage point of smaller nations, these conquerors seemed almost invincible. Among the many cities they had subdued, each had been left in ruins, a testament to Assyria's ruthless tactics. Stories spread of entire populations taken captive, scattered to foreign lands to break their spirits. And whenever the Assyrians massed their forces at a new border, rumor alone often forced the besieged to surrender without resistance. In the eyes of surrounding territories, no fortress walls, no cunning alliances, and no mortal king could stand against them for long. But there was one city that did not fade quietly into subjugation. Jerusalem, nestled in the rugged highlands of Judah, had managed to remain free so far. Nevertheless, the watchers on Jerusalem's walls saw the dust clouds rising across the horizon, a grim sign that the Assyrian tide was rolling toward them. Some whispered that the dreaded King Sennacherib was leading his legions personally, determined to bring all of Judah under his iron rule. This unstoppable wave of conquest was now aimed at the very heart of Hezekiah's kingdom. The tension was palpable. Warriors in Jerusalem readied their shields, while farmers hurried to stockpile grain behind the city walls. Mothers hushed their children whenever a distant trumpet blast drifted in on the wind. The legend of Assyrian cruelty hung like a dark curtain over the inhabitants' hearts. Yet in the midst of this fear, a quiet confidence was stirring, one that had been carefully cultivated by the city's king. Unlike many rulers who panicked at the mention of Assyria, Hezekiah carried an unshakable trust in a power far greater than any mortal empire. But would that trust be enough when confronted by so great an army? What the Assyrians did not realize was that their usual tactics, so effective elsewhere, were about to collide with an unwavering faith unlike anything they had ever faced. Long before the Assyrian threat darkened Jerusalem's doorstep, a subtle renewal had begun within the kingdom of Judah. King Hezekiah, ascending to the throne at a time when spiritual decline was rampant, chose to restore something crucial that had been lost. The temple in Jerusalem, once the vibrant heart of worship, had been neglected. Sacrifices ceased, sacred festivals were half forgotten, and idols had sprung up in the high places. It was as if the people had grown numb to their history and identity. Hezekiah, however, stood apart from this apathy. He believed fervently that the well-being of his nation depended not merely on strong walls or well-stocked armories, but on an unbroken bond with the God of their forefathers. Almost as soon as he took power, he ordered the temple doors, long sealed by his father, to be thrown open. Priests and Levites were summoned to clear debris, refurbish sacred vessels, and cleanse every chamber from defilement. Walls once coated with dust and decay were carefully polished so that people entering the temple might sense renewed hope. Word of the king's conviction spread swiftly among the citizens. Those who had grown used to spiritual neglect found themselves curious about these changes. Some old men and women recalled how things had been in the days of faithful rulers like David. Younger generations saw the bustle of temple repairs and felt a stirring of pride for their heritage. Hezekiah's reforms were not a flash in the pan. He painstakingly re-established festivals such as the Passover, reminding everyone of Judah's historic deliverance from bondage long ago. But he was no dreamer, ignoring the realities of war. Knowing that enemies roamed the region, Hezekiah also took practical measures. He strengthened Jerusalem's defenses, constructed a tunnel to secure the city's water supply, and ensured that archers were trained and weaponry maintained. His skillful blend of spiritual dedication and worldly prudence was rare. Lesser rulers might have relied on bribery or alliances with foreign powers, but Hezekiah's strategy rested on two pillars: devotion to God and careful preparation on the home front. In times past, such a balanced stance might have gone unnoticed by foreign eyes, but the Assyrians were not ignorant of the changes in Judah. They heard rumors of a king whose moral reforms inspired fierce loyalty among his subjects. Whispers in the region said that Hezekiah was dismantling pagan shrines and trusting entirely in one God to shield Jerusalem. To the vast Assyrian Empire, accustomed to seeing people cower in fear, this devotion was interesting, perhaps even a little baffling. Yet they believed their unstoppable war machine could break any resistance, whether founded on faith or not. Even so, Hezekiah's brand of leadership gave Jerusalem an unusual edge, a moral unity that rarely existed in besieged cities. The loyalty of Judah's citizens could not be bought by intimidation alone. What the people did not yet know was that their faith would soon be tested by a threat so terrifying that many might be tempted to question everything Hezekiah had taught them. But while the king's reforms took root, the Assyrian tide drew closer, bringing new forms of intimidation that would shake the city to its core. Nightfall brought an uneasy silence to Jerusalem, broken only by the occasional watchman's footsteps on the city walls. Rumor had already swept through the countryside of Judah. Strongholds were falling one by one to the relentless onslaught of King Sennacherib's forces. It was only a matter of time before the greatest army on earth encircled Jerusalem itself. Before long, dust clouds appeared on the horizon, marking the approach of Assyrian battalions. If distant glimpses were unsettling, the full sight was staggering. Row upon row of infantry, cavalry, and engineers pulled siege machines bristling with iron fittings. Campfires sprouted like malevolent stars around the city, each flame representing disciplined men trained to crush any defiance. From behind the walls, soldiers of Judah gripped their weapons nervously. They had heard horrific tales of conquered cities, burned gates, battered walls, survivors dragged into captivity. To many, survival now seemed a faint hope. Yet Hezekiah forbade panic. He reminded the people that beyond the militaristic noise of Assyria, a higher authority presided. Still, it was not easy to hold fast to faith when spears and axes glittered in the twilight. The Assyrians did not rely solely on brute strength. They were masters of psychological warfare. A chief official, fluent in the language of Judah, stood by the walls shouting well-chosen words, hoping to sow fear and division. His speech was cunning. First, he mocked Hezekiah's reforms, casting doubt on the city's defenses. Next, he promised that if the people defected, they would enjoy comfort under Assyria's rule. Finally, he ridiculed the God of Israel, pointing out that other nations' deities had failed miserably against the might of Sennacherib. Such verbal assaults hit the heart of Jerusalem's morale. Some on the walls trembled, recalling the fate of the northern kingdom that had been swept away by these same invaders. Others felt anger kindle in their chests at the blasphemous comparison between the God of Israel and powerless idols. The official spoke in the common Hebrew tongue, ensuring every citizen could hear the threats. It was a strategic ploy. Fear runs wild when spread among the masses. Hezekiah's response to this flood of intimidation was bold. He instructed his people to remain silent and not engage with enemy taunts. The city's hush underlined their decision to trust their king rather than arguments swirling in the air. Meanwhile, Hezekiah himself received letters from the Assyrian camp filled with scornful words and dire warnings. Each line practically dripped with arrogance. The message was clear. Sennacherib had crushed other lands. Why would Jerusalem be any different? Little did the Assyrians know that their biggest challenge wasn't Jerusalem's walls or Hezekiah's men. The seeds of faith Hezekiah had sown were about to bear remarkable fruit in the face of impossible odds. Inside the city's sacred precinct, torches flickered against the polished stone of the temple. The air was thick with anticipation. King Hezekiah stood before the altar, holding the scornful letter from Sennacherib in his trembling hands. Instead of responding to threats with more threats, Hezekiah did something extraordinary. He spread the letter out before God, every mocking line laid bare. This was not an act of mere ritual. It was raw humility and deep conviction. Surrounded by swirling rumors of unstoppable armies and unrelenting sieges, Hezekiah brought the crisis directly into the presence of the Almighty. In a quiet, fervent prayer, he acknowledged the devastation wrought by the Assyrians in other lands. He admitted the enemy's strength, but also declared that the gods the Assyrians had defeated were mere idols, not the living God who created heaven and earth. That night, in the quiet hallways of Jerusalem, something shifted. The city still braced for war, but a hope took root that ran deeper than any rumor. The prophet Isaiah, revered across Judah, also brought a powerful word. He had not wavered in proclaiming God's messages, even when they offered warnings of judgment. Now he arrived with a promise of salvation that says, "He will not enter this city or shoot an arrow here. By the way he came, he will return." Those who overheard Isaiah's declaration felt their hearts quicken. Could it be possible? The mightiest empire of the age was literally at their doorstep, boasting 185,000 strong. And yet, God's word was resolute. Sennacherib would fail to breach Jerusalem's walls. Many must have felt torn. On one hand, the clang of Assyrian armaments. On the other, the prophet's seemingly impossible assurance. Night after night, tension grew. The people likely feared waking to the thunderous sounds of battering rams, ladders, and archers. Yet Hezekiah clung to Isaiah's prophecy, urging his subjects to believe. He had prepared the city for siege, but his true strength lay in prayer and the unshakable conviction that God's power would outmatch any chariot or spear. For centuries afterward, believers would look back on this moment as the turning point, when faith overshadowed fear in the hearts of Jerusalem's people. If Isaiah's words were indeed from God, deliverance would come. If not, the city's downfall would be swift and merciless. Night sky glittered with distant stars, oblivious to the drama unfolding below. Within Jerusalem, the faithful waited with bated breath. No one, not even seasoned warriors, could have foreseen the staggering event that was about to unfold in the Assyrian camp. Few sights are more intimidating than a massive army encamped under moonlight. Torchlight flickered across countless tents, revealing the shadows of soldiers who were confident victory was at hand. For all the fear their presence invoked, the Assyrians seemed just as calm and methodical as ever. Within the besieged city, families clung to fragments of hope. Children lay awake, hearing muffled talk of the prophet's promise. Some men paced along the walls, straining their eyes to detect any nighttime maneuver. Overhead, the stars seemed frozen, as though holding their breath. Then came a night that defied every calculation. One moment, the Assyrian camp was alive with murmurs and the muffled clang of armor. The next, a mystical silence settled across the tents. No trumpets sounded, no sounds of repositioning, nothing. When the first rays of dawn pierced the sky, Jerusalem's watchmen peered out, bracing for the usual flurry of enemy activity. Instead, they encountered an uncanny stillness. As a few watchers rode out carefully to investigate, a scene of devastation emerged. Tens of thousands of Assyrian soldiers lay still in the early morning light. The camp was not torn apart by fire or pillaged by an invading force. Rather, it looked as if a mysterious hand had swept through in the dead of night, leaving behind an ocean of silent forms. Scripture records it succinctly, attributing the event to a divine messenger, yet the brevity only highlights the magnitude. An entire army, undefeated on so many fields of battle, had been laid low in a single, unimaginable moment. Those who discovered this horrifying sight could scarcely believe their eyes. Many were left trembling at the demonstration of power beyond human comprehension. Sennacherib himself, so full of bluster just hours before, had no choice but to retreat. His unstoppable war machine had been halted, not by Jerusalem's archers, catapults, or cunning strategies, but by something no mortal general could plan against. Messengers spread the word. The mightiest force in the known world had fallen overnight, fulfilling Isaiah's prophecy word for word. Within Jerusalem's walls, shock mingled with relief. Their city was spared. Their king's unwavering faith had become a conduit for divine intervention. Many dropped to their knees in gratitude, praising the God who had proven that no empire, no matter how vast, is above his authority. In the aftermath, the city's gates were thrown open cautiously. Traders and farmers ventured out. Stories traveled farther than the boundaries of Judah, growing more astonishing with each telling. Some speculated that a sudden outbreak of disease or plague had swept through the camp. Others believed rumors of unseen angelic forces that destroyed the Assyrian ranks. The effect was the same. Jerusalem was delivered, and Sennacherib's proud boast came to nothing. But was this incredible event merely a religious myth? Even outside biblical tradition, fragments of history and archaeology hint that something colossal happened, leaving scholars to puzzle over how such a mighty empire stumbled so drastically. The story of Assyria's sudden defeat might sound too grand to be true, yet intriguing artifacts and ancient records paint a consistent picture. Something truly devastating befell Sennacherib's forces during his campaign against Judah. Foremost among these archaeological gems is the Sennacherib Prism, a hexagonal clay artifact inscribed with the king's own words. Today it's housed in the Oriental Institute of Chicago, where scholars and curious onlookers alike can read Sennacherib's version of events. He brags about locking King Hezekiah in Jerusalem like a bird in a cage, and enumerates the capture of numerous Judean cities. But one glaring omission leaps off the prism's clay surface. Sennacherib never claims to have conquered Jerusalem. For a monarch who meticulously glorified his military conquests, failing to mention a final victory is peculiar. Historians find this silence more telling than any boast. It aligns strongly with the biblical account that, despite surrounding Jerusalem, the Assyrians withdrew without toppling the city. Outside of direct Assyrian records, the Greek historian Herodotus also recounts a strange disaster that struck the Assyrian army near Egypt, allegedly involving swarms of field mice destroying their weapons in the night. While the details differ, the essence is the same: a swift, inexplicable calamity sidelined an otherwise unstoppable army. Whether plague, mice, or some other force, historians and theologians alike see echoes of the biblical miracle. Further evidence comes from the dramatic reliefs found in Sennacherib's former palace at Nineveh. Among those massive wall carvings, the siege of Lachish, a major Judean city, is commemorated in detail. We see battered walls, exiled prisoners, and the cruelty for which Assyria was famous. But no such relief depicting Jerusalem's conquest exists. One might expect the capital city of Judah, if truly conquered, to have received prime position in Sennacherib's bragging artistry. Instead, there's silence once again. Even the aftermath of Sennacherib's reign, documented in various Babylonian and Assyrian records, points to a fall from grace that ended in internal turmoil. The biblical text claims Sennacherib was later struck down by his own sons, and Babylonian records confirm that he indeed died violently, presumably at their hands. For many, these extra-biblical notes, while brief, underscore the accuracy of the scriptural narrative. Jerusalem itself holds holds tangible proof of Hezekiah's forward-thinking measures. The Siloam Tunnel, carved to secure a water source within the city, stands as a testament to the precarious days of the siege. Modern tourists can walk through that same tunnel, chopped out of rock more than 2 millennia ago, an unspoken witness to the fierce drama that once unfolded there. But what does this astonishing clash between the faith of a small kingdom and the might of an empire teach us? Looking closer, we discover timeless truths that still resonate for anyone facing impossible battles. Stories of ancient warfare might seem distant from our modern routines, yet the narrative of Jerusalem's deliverance holds lessons that have transcended millennia, echoing into present-day struggles. Hezekiah's experience shows that no matter how intimidating the challenge, faith can stand its ground when anchored in what's eternal. First, there is the lesson of humility versus arrogance. Sennacherib and his officials scoffed at the God of Israel, treating him as just another tribal deity. Their downfall exemplifies the timeless proverb, "Pride goes before destruction." Arrogance blinds us to higher truths and invites the very collapse we assume can't happen to us. Second, the story highlights the power of prayer and action working hand in hand. Hezekiah did not only drop to his knees in the temple, he also reinforced Jerusalem's walls and secured the city's water supply. True faith doesn't mean neglecting wise preparation. Rather, it harmonizes human responsibility with a reliance on divine help. Third, the sudden annihilation of the Assyrian camp underscores a potent truth. No crisis is beyond God's reach. Whether one interprets the event as a supernatural strike or a providential outbreak of disease, the message remains that God's sovereignty supersedes even the fiercest earthly power. For people of faith, this is a soothing reminder in times of personal or collective struggle. Fourth, the principle of the faithful remnant is woven through these chapters. Judah's numbers were meager compared to the Assyrian Empire, yet they held steadfast to their beliefs. That steadfastness became a channel for a breathtaking miracle. Even today, it's often the smaller, committed communities that catalyze great changes in society, offering hope where others see only gloom. There is also a direct challenge to fear. The inhabitants of Jerusalem had every reason to panic. Their enemies were at the gates, with a record of crushing entire civilizations. But Hezekiah's rallying cry, "Trust in the Lord, do not be afraid," reflects a choice that remains relevant. Do we collapse beneath the weight of fear, or do we stand firm in faith, expecting that help can arrive in unexpected ways? Finally, this story is a testament to the ultimate purpose of divine intervention. Hezekiah prayed not merely for personal survival or national pride. He prayed so that the entire world might realize there is one sovereign God. That perspective shifts deliverance from a self-centered plea to a demonstration of divine glory and care. With each passing generation, people facing daunting odds have found renewed courage in accounts like Hezekiah's. Whether the threat is a literal army, a personal crisis, or a global turbulence, the underlying truth remains: where human might fails, divine strength prevails. And in the end, such encounters can transform doubt into devotion and despair into lasting hope. It even gets more interesting. The story doesn't just end with an army retreat. Jerusalem's deliverance signaled a fresh chapter, one that can still spark renewed faith in our own complicated world. Morning broke over Jerusalem with a warmth that felt like a promise. Gone were the suffocating clouds of fear. Children who had tossed and turned all night stepped outside to discover that the insurmountable threat had vanished. Soldiers who had prepared for a brutal battle found no enemy left to fight. Merchants tentatively unlocked their doors, and the once terrified inhabitants began speaking in quiet, doubtful voices about a future they had nearly lost hope in. But the story of Hezekiah and the Assyrian defeat wasn't merely about dodging disaster. In the weeks and months that followed, Jerusalem revived in more ways than one. The spiritual fervor that drove the king's reforms gained new intensity. People no longer approached the temple from a sense of duty alone, but with reverence and joyful gratitude. The memory of that horrifying night, when 185,000 soldiers stood poised to shatter their city, gave them a deeper appreciation for each sunrise. Looking further, the political aftermath was equally striking. Sennacherib's empire, once unstoppable, staggered from this blow. Internal strife and rumors of betrayal soon plagued at the mighty realm. Scholars note how such events can mark the turning points of history. If Jerusalem had fallen swiftly, the region's cultural and religious legacy might have been drastically altered. Instead, Judah preserved a unique identity that would echo through centuries of faith tradition. For modern readers or listeners, the real power of this account lies in its enduring relevance. We too confront obstacles that appear insurmountable. We face giants in the form of financial crises, societal tensions, or even personal battles with doubts and fears. The lesson from Jerusalem's improbable survival is that faith, when genuine, does more than offer a comforting thought. It can alter outcomes in ways human logic fails to predict. The biblical narrative and external historical clues both underscore that this was no mere fluke. Archaeological evidence, ancient records, and relics like the Sennacherib prism attest that something utterly remarkable happened. While skeptics debate the precise nature of the disaster that befell the Assyrian camp, the lasting consensus is that Jerusalem escaped certain conquests under extraordinarily mysterious circumstances. More than 2,700 years later, the city remains a testament to the triumph of courage and belief over despair. On the path of faith, adversity often serves as a trial, refining convictions and revealing the might of God. As the Psalms declare, God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. The story of Hezekiah breathes life into those words, illustrating that genuine trust in God has tangible consequences, both for the devout and for those observing from afar. Wherever you find yourself today, whether faced with a private struggle or overwhelmed by the turbulence of our times, remember this ancient city and its unwavering king. Their deliverance was not random. It demonstrated that divine power can intercept and overcome even the most formidable threats. Indeed, the same God who acted in those days continues to work in unseen ways now, inviting each of us to trust him in our darkest hours. So take heart. The mightiest armies of the world, with all their cunning and force, can never overshadow the maker of heaven and earth. And just as Jerusalem discovered, those who stand on faith's foundation have every reason to hope. The outcome may not always arrive in the form we expect, but rest assured, a single moment of divine intervention can shift the entire course of history. After all, if 185,000 soldiers cannot thwart God's plan, perhaps our own rumbling challenges aren't so impossible after all. Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share this video. You may be blessing someone today by just sharing this message of hope and strength with them.